Yes. Well, then we are more or less ready for the next presentation. And sorry about the long break. The next presenter is a Curasight, very interesting company. They both offer treatment and diagnostic. So they actually address two very important issues within the industry today. And with me today I have Ulrik Krasilnikov and Andreas Kjær. Welcome, both of you, and please carry on.
Thank you, Klaus, for the introduction. And my name is Ulrik Krasilnikov, and I'm the CEO and CFO of Curasight. And I will, together with co-founder and CMO and CSO, Professor Andreas Kjær, take you through this exciting case. Just a short disclaimer. We have some highlights in case there will be new investors attending this presentation. We are a Danish clinical phase 2 company founded back in 2013, headed by Andreas Kjær. And this is based on more than 10 years of research at Rigshospitalet in Copenhagen. And first of all, Curasight has developed a proprietary platform within imaging, which can be used in several cancer types, which is named uTrace. And uTrace has been clinical broad testing in several cancer types also, and actually in 8 ongoing or completed phase 2 clinical trials, and that is quite unique. Furthermore, uTrace has also been tested in more than 450 patients, and by that proven to be safe and also de-risked. That is also important to recognize. And furthermore, we are tapping into a very interesting growing market within this field also, but I will also highlight some points of that later on. And then we have used quite a lot of efforts in order to strengthen our IP position with issued patents, and this is ongoing also still. But first of all, we were focusing on the US and EU, both within the diagnostic path, but also within the therapeutic path. And finally, what is important to highlight is that we got listed at Spotlight Stock Market in October 2020 for raising around 95 million. And that is first of all to focus on our lead candidate, brain cancer, into financing a final phase 3 PET imaging study for diagnostic purpose, and also to pursue the therapeutic option, which is named uTreat, also within the brain cancer, and made ready for a phase 1/2 clinical trial. Just some highlights. I will not go through all of them, but just to emphasize that we are, among others, was awarded with 2 prizes in connection with the IPO. And furthermore, what is important also for new investors, that we have initiated a commission research with SEB and Capital Partner last year, and the report and what they're coming up with here is quite interesting, and also in order to understand the market and the field we are operating in. So I recommend new investors also to dig into that path. Just to give you a flavor of the nuclear medicine market worldwide, the growth factors, among others, is due to the aging population, and by that, there's unfortunately a increased number of cancer incidences every year. Furthermore, a wider use of nuclear medicine around the world in general, and furthermore, also introduction of new radiopharmaceuticals like uTreat and uTrace will increase the market considerably going forward. But quite interesting, and also what we are looking into for the coming years for Curasight perspective. And then I will hand over to Andreas, who will take you through this exciting technology.
Okay, Ulrik, maybe I can ask you a question in the meanwhile.
Yeah.
What kind of collaboration do you expect with Rigshospitalet going forward?
I think going forward, we will focus on that will be a minor part going forward, because the phase 3 trials will be based on multi-center studies comprising also other hospitals, among others in the US also. So that will be
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm sure, Ulrik, I don't know how much you explained, Ulrik, but the idea is basically that this platform is called a theranostic platform. So part of it is for diagnostics. That's what we call uTrace. and part of it is for therapy. It's treat. And it's really two versions of the same compound. I'll come back to that. The trick with this to combine diagnostics and therapy is that you can predict whether your therapy will get access to the tumor by doing the imaging first, because it's in essence the same ligand. Before I come to the ligand and being two versions of itself, I will just go through the target. The reason we call it uTrace and uTreat is because the target is uPAR. And uPAR is a unique biomarker of cancer. It's expressed in cancer cells, and in particular, it's highly expressed when the cancer is aggressive. It's part of the system that makes a cancer spread. And you can also imagine that the cells that are the cause of spread, forming metastasis, if you could target them and treat them, you will have a very efficient therapy. And that's what we are pursuing. There's relatively low expression of uPAR in healthy tissue, which gives a good relation between, if you do this therapy towards the cancer cells, you don't want too much of the radiotherapy to influence healthy tissue. And then maybe most important is, if you compare with other companies working in the area of targeted radionuclide therapy, they normally work on compounds and targets that are only expressed in one cancer. For instance, PSMA, it's only expressed on prostate cancer. Our marker is cancer specific, but cancer type unspecific. And this means that we can target many different types of cancers. And I come back to that. The concept is shown here in a diagram. The receptor we are targeting is uPAR. That is what is red, shown in red here. Then we have a peptide that binds both the AE105, and this compound we can arm with different kinds of radioactivity, either harmless radioactivity as in uTrace that can be used for imaging, or non-harmless radioactivity in uTreat that does a local radiotherapy. And of course, since the range of this therapy is very short, it's a gentle way. I also come back to that. On the next slide, as we mentioned, we can actually pursue and investigator-initiated trials are performed in 8 different cancer indications. So we have many cancers we can choose from, but right now we, with our recently expanded strategy, are going for 5 indications where we have seen high expression of uPAR and where there's a high unmet medical need. And we have previously talked a lot about brain cancer. We come back to that, where we pursue both therapy and imaging. In prostate cancer, we pursue an imaging-only strategy. We could also do therapy, but due to the competitive landscape, we are going for the unmet need in imaging. And then finally and recently, we added both neuroendocrine tumors and head and neck cancer, 2 very important cancer indications, where we also are going for both imaging and therapy. And the rest of the presentation will basically be explaining the different indications and why we chose to pursue these. If we go for glioblastoma, it's the most common primary malignant brain tumor. There are 65,000 new brain tumors in the US and EU each year, of which 30,000 are of this very aggressive type. 10% of the cases are in children, so there's even more to gain if you have an efficient treatment, many saved years of life. And all these patients more or less today receive external radiation therapy. Our technology, uTreat, is local radiotherapy, so we don't have to convince the doctors that radiotherapy is the right thing to give to this patient. We are merely changing it from external, not so gentle radiotherapy to more gentle injected radiotherapy, and I come back to a little bit on how it works, the concept in it. For 15 years, nothing has happened with the survival in these patients. The survival rate is just as it was 15 years ago. The therapy is just as it was introduced 15 years ago. Despite a lot of effort on making new therapies, it has been unsuccessful. And this is because it's very aggressive and the way this tumor grows. So on average, patients live just a little more than 1 year. And after 5 years, there will only be 1 in 20 patients still alive. So we hope, of course, that we can be game-changing with uTreat. And uTreat is a new way, a new concept, so it has the potential to be that game changer. As I mentioned under the platform, when we talk theranostic, that the thing is that you can do imaging first and see whether your tracer gets there. And if it gets there, and only if it gets there, then you can do the therapy. And we call that what you see is what you treat. And this is a patient where you can see here on the MRI, the tumor, but you can also see over here that we have high uptake of uTrace. In such a patient, we know that uTreat will get access to this tumor, and therefore this would be a patient in the future eligible for therapy. The concept then is that we have these 2 versions, and uTreat, as I mentioned, was armed with a harmful radiation type, a beta emitter, but the nice thing is that this radiation only has a range of 1 millimeter. So we inject the tracer, or uTreat, it automatically seeks out the cancer cells because they express uPAR and the compound binds to uPAR. It's excreted from the rest of the body, more or less, and then it sits on the tumor cells. And from there, it sends out radiation, but radiation only with 1 millimeter range. In this way, you don't get irradiation of the whole body. So it's a more gentle concept of radiotherapy. It's also shown diagrammatically here that today you irradiate from the outside and you pass through healthy tissue, so it's much less gentle. Also, if you have disseminated disease with metastasis, there's no way you can do external radiation therapy. It will give far too much radiation to the whole body. If you have spread disease and you use the injected radiotherapy, it can be used because it will seek out all the metastasis. In brain cancer, it can also be shown in this way, in a diagram. On the right, you see where the tumor is and where the uTreat will sit. This is just as what you saw on the image from the brain earlier. But when you do external radiation therapy, you irradiate from many angles. It sums up in the tumor, yes, but you get a lot of radiation, the green and yellow areas here, of healthy brain. And that is actually what limits the amount of dose you can give. So a more gentle way of therapy, but also a therapy that can also target the small islands, which is known to be part of glioblastoma. With cancer cells you cannot see on an MRI scan, they will also be seeked out by uTreat.
Yeah, and this is just to give you an idea of the total accessible market size, which can be divided up within imaging, which is uTrace, and therapy, which is uTreat. And this is based on that all 65 new cases each year, 65,000 new cases, and that is totally in US and EU together, should be scanned. And they get 1 scan at least at the first. And this is based on comparable reimbursement codes, which amounts to around €3,000 per scan. It sums up to around 200 million euro annually, but still an attractive market. If you go into the therapeutic part, it's totally different. And that is again based on comparable PET tracers, the reimbursement code among others for Lutathera, which is used in neuroendocrine tumors, and that is actually reimbursed by 170,000 euro per treatment series. So also very attractive, even that we are only focusing on the high-grade gliomas, which sums up to around 30,000 new cases each year. So still, even that brain cancer is considered as an orphan disease, then from a business perspective, still attractive for Curasight.
Thanks a lot. And there's a couple of questions here, either for you, Andreas, or Ulrik. First of all, your phase 2 trials within lung cancer and mouth cancer. When would we hear anything from those 2 studies? And secondly, with this very, very strong platform you have, and you both address the diagnostic and the treatment market, you also mentioned, Andreas, that prostate cancer, you will use your trace diagnostic tool. This is the greatest indication for men, as I know it, compared to women with breast cancer. Are you going to partner with one of some of the companies with treatment? Or what are your plans? So 2 questions.
Yeah, you want us to, because we have some slides on both the prostate cancer and on the partnering. So maybe should we take them first, or do you want us to address the questions first?
Then you just answer them when you show the slides.
Yeah,
right.
maybe.
That's all right, Andreas.
Okay, so on the prostate cancer, we are pursuing an imaging only strategy right now. And the problem, when I went to medical school, we always learned that more patients die with prostate cancer than of prostate cancer. And this is because the vast majority are relatively benign and will not spread. The problem is there's an immense overtreatment because it's very difficult to predict who will not spread. And so a better safe than sorry strategy is applied right now. And it's estimated that at least 80% of prostatectomy, where you remove the whole prostate gland, are unnecessary. Is this trivial? No, because 70% of these patients get some degree of impotence or urinary incontinence. So people think thank God I got rid of my cancer, but the truth is the majority of these patients the cancer could just have been left. And this is what we want to solve image-wise. And today, the reason for this not being very effective is that repeated biopsies are taken. This is very uncomfortable. It's also hampered by infection and bleeding, but it's also unreliable because the biopsies may not get the most aggressive part of the tumor. If you repeat the biopsies after a couple of months, you get a different readout. And for this very reason, the doctors think, yes, I have something that looks relatively benign, but who knows whether the biopsies actually were precise where they took the biopsy. When you do imaging, you circumvent this sampling error because you get an image of the whole prostate gland. So you're not overlooking part of it. You are making a readout of where does it light up the most. And this is our strategy is to implement uTrace as a non-invasive biopsy for following these patients. This would be much more gentle and hopefully much more reliable. And in this way, we can save a lot of patients of unnecessary aggressive therapy when it's not important. And as you mentioned, there are many of these patients, and Ulrik, maybe you will take this.
Yes, this is just, as we are only focusing on imaging with the uTrace, this is just to show the total accessible market. Again, we are focusing on US and EU together, but with different reimbursement codes for the different areas, but totally around 1 billion annual euro within uTrace for prostate. So also for that part is attractive case to pursue.
Yeah, and then very, very briefly, just on the two last indications we're pursuing, neuroendocrine tumors is a tumor case with 35,000 new cases in the US and EU. And we have seen on the investigator-initiated imaging study that there's high expression of UPAR. So here we will pursue both therapy and imaging, and we will be able to serve some of the patients that currently not being served, basically using the same concept as we discussed in brain cancer.
Yeah, and this is to give you an idea within the neuroendocrine tumors. Again, we are pursuing the theranostic path, as Andreas explained before, both within the U-trace imaging and the therapeutic part also. And again, quite an interesting area to pursue from a business perspective. Even that therapeutic is a total different game also for the market size. But again, based on Lutathera, which is commonly used in the neuroendocrine tumors, and a Novartis product actually.
And the final indication we're pursuing is head and neck cancer, and here there's both. It's important to have something that is prognostic, because some of these are very aggressive, but some are not. And on the next slide, I will show that the phase 2 study really demonstrated that U-trace is extremely prognostic, but also these patients get external radiation therapy. And the problem is with the jaw and the teeth that you do a lot of harm, because the area where the tumor sits, it's unavoidable in many cases to do radiation of the jaw, and for that very reason, tooth extraction preventive is very often performed. So a lot of side effects on doing external radiation therapy in this area. And of course, if we can change this to injected targeted radionuclide therapy, it has the potential to be much more gentle and therefore help this patient with fewer side effects. And it's really a problem with these patients, external radiation therapy. And this is just the example of this is just an example of the survival, where you can see if these are all patients alive at the starting point, and then when they die off, they have less remaining. And if there's a high UPAR, then after 40 months, only half of the patients are alive. But if it's low UPAR, then we can identify patients with very high survival rate. And the idea is to use this for identifying the patients where therapy can be downscaled. So you don't have to go so aggressive on the radiation therapy, for instance. And this is very valuable when we discuss this with key opinion leaders within the field.
Yeah, and this is just to give you an idea of the market size within head and neck cancer. Quite a big, we are using the same reimbursement codes from the comparable PET tracers, but again, quite a huge possibilities within this field. I will not go into details for that also, but as the time is limited. But again, but within this specific indication, also very attractive to pursue.
Good. There's a question here before we come to the partnerships, Andreas and Ulrik. You recently announced 2 US patents for U-trace. Could you elaborate a little on that in the US market?
Yeah, I can take it. It's basically we have more technologies. It's actually a platform of U-trace, and this was covering a copper labeled version. So you can use different radioactivities, gallium-68 or copper-64. And the recent addition is that we broadened out the different variants of U-trace that we can use. Part of the importance of that is that these different versions can serve different needs. For instance, if you label with copper, it's very long-lived, so it can be centrally produced, which would make it easier to use more broadly and less specialized areas. So this is basically building around UPAR and U-trace more and more variants and optimized versions. So we have a very strong position on the IP. We continue to have freedom to operate analysis performed in the space by our patent agents, and they look very positive on that we have freedom to operate in the US and in Europe.
Thanks. Please carry on, Andreas, in terms of partnerships and your very strong portfolio, but also very wide. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Ulrik, maybe will you take that?
Yeah,
or
I will do that because recently we announced that the strategic partnerships will be a part of the ongoing strategy looking forward, and that is due to, among other things, a lot of advantages by partnerships, and we can also see other pharma and biotech companies pursuing this track right now. Also taking into consideration that the stock market at the moment and the field in general within the investor field within the biotech is a little tough at the moment to say, but definitely this has from the very beginning been a part of our strategy, but now we disclose also that we are pursuing it for the time to come. Also due to the stage we are right now, we are planning 4 phase 3 clinical trials. And that would be natural to partner up with some of the big companies in this field, and furthermore it will validate and also be a proof of concept for the whole company in Curasight that we partner up. Besides, which is also important for the investment point, is that we will get financing, and that financing will be non-diluting going forward. I would also like to emphasize that we have a very strong financial cash position right now, so that we don't. There's no need right now to get the new funding on board, but we have got some inquiries from potential partners which we are investigating going forward. What will be the best way for Curasight going forward to conduct these trials and also to eventually go into partnerships.
And I think maybe, Ulrik, if I can add, in particular, because we have a broadly applicable platform that we can basically be used in 80% of solid cancers, it's important to be in negotiation with partners. And we learned that typically partners are interested in certain cancer indications. They might be more interested in imaging, might be more interested in therapy. So it's definitely not ruled out that more partnerships could be relevant. It's typically that it needs to fit into the portfolios of interest of cancer indications, or where they have some synergies with other things they're working on. So so we believe very much in this track and are pursuing it at a time where we are not under pressure because we have a good cash position. I think that's a good position to negotiate from.
Definitely.
Thanks a lot, Andreas and Ulrik. Really great presentation and very interesting platform you are for the market. I hope to see you soon again. And with that said, thanks a lot for today. Thanks a lot for the good questions in the audience. Enjoy your day, both of you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.